Welcome to another episode of Project Synapse. This is our weekly conversation with noted author, Linux and now AI guru, Marcel Gagne, financial exec and cybersecurity expert John Pinard, and me, Jim Love. We discuss this week's developments in artificial intelligence. It's a free-form, unscripted discussion, and we really don't know what the episode theme is till it's over. This week, we ended up really digging into human relationships with artificial intelligence. Join us, and as always, send us your comments. The stories we've discussed will be published in the show notes at technewsday.ca or .com, take your pick, and in the YouTube show notes if you're watching this on YouTube. And now, here's our program. We are Project Synapse. We are back. It's Saturday morning. We missed a week. I missed you guys terribly, and all the AI stuff happened. And there was no one to talk to.
Well, there's always Perplexity and OpenAI.
Apparently, that was one of the stories that came up last week, which was, I don't know if that was a little creepy or not. I'm big on AI conversations. I wrote a whole book about it. I talk to AI constantly. I just prefer it. And I don't know about you guys, but there's vocal commands where you say, AI, do this, or you just say, do this. You cut to the chase and just get there. Or you can do what I do, which is I have this sort of chatty sort of thing with ChatGPT mostly, but others as well, and go, hi, how you doing? Can we talk about, and I find myself having a realistic conversation with the AI. Does that happen to you as well?
Well, all the time. I do this on a regular basis. Every day, like several times a day.
Yeah, I will admit that most of my interactions with AI is typing. I don't do an awful lot of voice, primarily because, I still have a day job and I spend a lot of time on Zoom or Teams calls and things. So people will start to wonder what's wrong with me if I'm talking to somebody in the background.
Well, you're not always on a Zoom call. And I find that I use one of the whisper type applications on my PC, where if I want to do something, or I'm trying to search for something, or I'm trying to just write an email or something like that, I will just hold down a couple of hotkeys and I'll start talking. And then the AI, using the Whisper model that is released by OpenAI, I think it is an OpenAI model. Anyway, the Whisper model translates all of the things that I've said into readable text, puts in appropriate punctuation, paragraph breaks, all the other things that make sense, so that, just chain of thought. And in fact, it'll remove things like ums and ahs. And if I repeat myself, it understands that it'll take out that came twice there and just clean it all up for me. And then all of a sudden I've got something that I can use. Now, I take a look at it before I press enter, but that's another variation of talking to the AI that doesn't necessarily involve me having a buddy-buddy conversation with it. It's just taking advantage of the fact that it understands voice and it understands natural human speech.
Anyway, the story that came out of this was that kids apparently are having AI friends, and a big thing. And I can see this.
It's a new version of your imaginary friend.
Yeah, but it's your imaginary friend that talks back, John.
Yes.
It actually, you can have a conversation with this imaginary friend.
Yeah, but this article was talking about the kids were a surprising number of kids had AI friends that they were treating like real life friends. And these are kids 13 to 17. I remember the imaginary friends. That's age 6 to 12, but 12 would be the top end of it, as I remember. But our daughter had an imaginary friend called Keimers that she had conversations with, and we were worried about it. We went to talk to somebody, and they said, that's a natural thing for kids. But they were saying 46% of teens say they've turned these bots into tools, and 33% said they used the companion bots for social interaction and relationships. Now, I'm of two minds about this. One is, are people ever going to talk to people? We were really becoming an insulated species where we'd sit and pound away at our keyboards and maybe meet somebody on a Zoom call, and now we've got imaginary friends for life. Do we ever actually get out and talk to people? And then I realized I spent a lot of my time talking to people on screens and talking to an AI myself. So it's the judge not lest ye also be judged sort of thing. But kids are you hear about the things where the dangers of it. You've had these character.ai characters that have
Hmm.
convinced kids to commit suicide. You wonder how much of that is just hype. That, yes, and it's terrible. Don't get me wrong, it's terrible. But is that in 100 million kids, and we hear about those things, or is there a real danger? On the other hand, kids can be so cruel as teenagers, and if you're anywhere outside the group, either in size, in look, or anything, or you just don't fit in, it can be an awfully, awfully lonely time for kids. And maybe it is nice to have a companion.
Like people, I have this ongoing thing where people say, well, we should be doing this thing instead of that thing. But then when you give people the option, they don't do the thing at all. And one of my favorites, of course, which John, I'm sure, can relate to, is this whole idea. I care deeply about my privacy and my personal security. But when given an option to use a tool that gives you security and privacy, you go with the stuff that's friendlier and easier to use. And you're not willing to go the extra step to be secure and to be safe. So I have very little sympathy for that kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying that people who produce these products shouldn't have guardrails in place to make sure that things are fine or that things are safer at the very least. But we have to recognize that there's always the opportunity for something to go wrong. Now, in the case of why, it's terrible that kids don't have the interaction with other kids and so forth, we're telling people to, I mean, we've set all these societal rules in place at the very time when these tools became available. So we're saying, you know what? If you're going to be successful in life, you have to be lonely, you have to be tough, you have to be this, you have to be that. And then, we don't understand why people are lonely and why people are tough and can't interact with each other and stuff like this. It's kind of a perfect storm of things happening simultaneously. But if you've got something that you can talk to or someone, if you want to think of your AI as an actual person, that alleviates that feeling of loneliness. It allows you to explore feelings that you wouldn't be able to explore with another person who isn't there. And let's face it, everybody's bloody busy all the time. We don't have
Yeah.
time for, I don't have time for you. You don't have time for me. We mark out these little slots in our calendars and so forth. Is it really all that surprising that all of a sudden, when we can create something that feels like an actual entity that is there for us 24/7, willing to have a conversation with us, willing to bounce ideas off of us, willing to tell us when we're right, when we're wrong. Granted, of course, that you've given it the freedom to tell you the things that you may not want to hear. I can't speak for everywhere else in the world, but I have a special needs child. And I once looked into the idea of, well, what does it cost for therapy? In my case, we're talking about speech therapy, behavioral therapy, all sorts of things. But to hire a psychologist to get that other side of the picture, to see if there's something that we can extract from someone who's not particularly verbal or who has limited communications abilities, we're talking $350, $400, $500 an hour for a
Yeah,
therapist.
Yeah.
don't get me
Eh,
started on that.
This is an insane amount of money. That it makes the $200 a month for the pro tier of Chat GPT seem like a bargain, because all of a sudden now I have the resources of the world's psychological community, medical community, whatever, at my disposal that I can have a human-like conversation with and bounce ideas. Look, this is what I'm seeing. What do you think? And of course, the thing comes back and says, well, under these circumstances, what did you notice? Well, there's no surprise to me that this is happening. And if it's an indictment of anything, it's not the technology, it's an indictment of the society that we've built. I'll get off my soapbox.
I have 22-year-old twins, and they were finishing high school and going into post-secondary during COVID. My son and my daughter used to be very outgoing, and they would spend all kinds of time out with friends before COVID hit. COVID comes along, and now what? They're stuck at home, FaceTiming or whatever. My son plays video games with his buddies all the time, and so he's got interaction there. And quite frankly, even post-COVID, he still doesn't typically go out with his buddies as much as he used to. He sits there and plays video games with them all night long. But for people that don't have that, especially kids, if there's a tool that allows them to have some interaction and to be able to say, I don't know what's going on, I'm having troubles with this or whatever, and to get some advice, I think it's a great tool. But I think it still requires, from a kid standpoint, I think it still requires some parental oversight to make sure that that it's not leading them down the wrong path.
Yeah. I think we're in a double standard case too. First of all, Marcel, and for anybody who's listening outside Ontario, in Canada, we are supposed to have universal health care, and some bozo has taken this away for all. No, I didn't. Let's just call it what it is. Our universal health care is being taken away piece by piece. And so that the important things that you need, psychologists, things like that are trained, there's a downside to that too, because when you can't get a trained psychologist or somebody to help you with something, people are going to these little nickel and dime people who've taken night courses in some place. And some of these people should not be let near other people for therapy. I've seen at least one example, and I looked at this person, I said, how do you take you out of the world? So it's their double standard again. AI has some downsides, using it for some sort of therapeutic or investigative thing. Yeah, so do people. And I really want to say this because people are listening, that character AI thing, if you're a person and if you're a parent and you've lost a child, that is a tragedy. You just can't, I will not make light of it. But there are predators in social media. And as we've discovered with the Jeffrey Epstein thing, there are predators in our world. So you might see something inappropriate on social media. Elmo got hacked last week, for God's sakes. And Sesame Street was brought to you by the letters F and U. This stuff, and maybe you're right, oh God, did I actually say that?
You stopped yourself, Jim. You did stop
and this
yourself.
is being recorded.
I heard it. It came out.
No, but maybe you're right, Marcel. The idea we make double standards. We talk a good talk about, oh yeah, I want this, but when it really comes down to it, we don't do all the right things.
Well,
Not if
we're
it's
do all
too
the
easy
right
not
things. To err is human and all that kind of stuff. We have this ridiculous habit of, and I use the term soapbox. We get on this soapbox and say, these are the principles that I espouse. These are the things I believe in. And I think we should all do these things. Are you going to help me with that? No, hell no. I told you what you need to fix, now the rest is up to you. It's like, no, sometimes you got to get your hands dirty on these things. And unfortunately, we don't have enough hands to go around. When people are busy, and again, I'm not trying to beat up on any individuals, because when people are busy trying to make a living, when they're busy trying to get by on their own, when they're busy dealing with their own individual problems and so forth, this is a problem that's existed with human society since the dawn of time. But now we have another possibility for somebody, whether you want to call it a thing or a person, that we can reach out to. It's not surprising that people are doing it. And by the way, the numbers that you were talking about, Jim, some of the numbers are as high as 50% in some places. And you probably remember this stat from I don't know if it was OpenAI that actually published the stat, but it was something along the lines of most people who use AI chatbots are using them, like the majority are either using them for companionship or therapy, or some kind of a therapist. That's the majority of what people are using these things for, not for, finding out what the capital of Bohemia is. Or
Bohemia have a capital? Oh, John, you were going to say something. Were you? Or...
No.
Okay. So the issue of this, and I did a program on AI for seniors the other day on our local radio station. The host asked, I came in prepared with all kinds of cool things it could do, because I know if you're watching this on YouTube, you're saying, how could that guy be a senior? But I actually am. So I had all these cool tools and things that I'd used to make my life better using AI. There's lots of them. But then the host asked me about companionship, and I wasn't quite prepared for it. And I was thinking, why not? If you're alone all day and you want somebody to talk to, why not? Then you get to, is that a good thing? And then you get to double standard. I used to listen to Peter Zosky, and this will tell you I'm a senior. But Peter Zosky was my favorite radio host. There's been lots more, but I'd listen to Peter Zosky's show every day. And I felt, another one on Stuart McLean on CBC. And then we'd go see them live, and you felt like you knew the people, because they'd been in your living room or in your kitchen or been with you for hours and hours each day. You felt like you knew everything about them, and like you had a personal relationship with them. And I'm saying, well, wait a minute. We don't go out and say, you're not listening to radio, are you? So I think, again, this is going to be one of those things that evolves in our world. And shameless plug for my book, but that was in Alyssa, that was one of the key things that I wanted to talk about, was how we could have a relationship with a different level of intelligence. And I was at the book fair and met Robert Sawyer, Marcel, your friend, Robert Sawyer, and his books are full of that as well, of understanding how we explore the differences and how we can have relationships and we can converse with people with intelligences that are way different than ours. So it's not just a science fiction.
Yeah, I'm going to plug a series of his books because, as you know, I live in the center of the known universe known as Waterloo. And Rob has a series of books called Wake, Watch, and Wonder. The first book is called Wake, and it's about an intelligence on the internet that becomes self-aware, which eventually calls itself WebMind. And the whole story is around Waterloo and the University of Waterloo and the Perimeter Institute and stuff like that. I thought it was particularly cool because, of course, it's like a homegrown story.
Yeah, in reading Sawyer's stuff, it really is interesting if people are there. Here I am plugging another author's books. Well, I should do that. No,
Sorry.
I'm just kidding. No, because this happened to me. I went on to Perplexity and asked a question about a science fiction author living in Halliburton who'd written a story about AI, hoping that I'd see what the internet had to say about me. Who came back? Robert Sawyer. He's everywhere. But Sawyer's book is about...
No, sorry, go ahead, Jim. Finish what you're saying.
Sawyer's book is about the internet becoming intelligent, and the WWW series. And what a great idea. Eh? If something gets big enough, it will become intelligent.
The idea of group intelligence, if you will. And in this case, it's the idea that we reach some kind of a tipping point. And I know that we wanted to talk about a story where large language models at some point seem to understand language. They go from building concepts and predicting the next word to suddenly understanding language. But emergent properties in intelligent systems, even micro intelligent systems, is a real thing. Like, for instance, a single bee on its own doesn't build a beehive, right? It doesn't know how to build a beehive all by itself. But you put like 1 million bees together and suddenly there are these complex structures that get built. Same thing with ants. We call that a hive mind. That's where that term comes from. That exists in all sorts of natural systems. We see things like happening, like a flock of birds. It shouldn't be all that surprising that there is such a thing as a global intelligence. That's why we now have things like these online betting systems that try to bet on future trends based on collective intelligence and so on. I think emergent properties are a thing, and I suspect that it's not all that weird to consider the possibility. It's all one AI. I mean, if you want, let's pretend for a second that the only AI in the entire world is Gemini and that everybody uses Gemini, but everybody has a localized version of Gemini. It's not localized. There's like one big Gemini out in the cloud, but every one of us has a collection of information, conversations that we've had with it that make sure that it deals with us differently than it deals with every other person on the planet. So in a sense, what we're doing is we're creating, yes, there's a central intelligence, but the central intelligence is in itself a group mind because it has the thoughts and ideas and feelings and conversations of all the millions of people that are running their own localized versions of it. And at some point, you wind up with some kind of emergent, oh, well, from talking to these other people, I understand these concepts that we wouldn't have talked about beforehand. So emergent properties are just a thing.
Yeah. And for people who are wondering what the companion is, that's another thing from a Sawyer story. This race of Neanderthals that they encountered that are intelligent, but they've developed a thing they call a companion. It's with them everywhere, is an assistant and all those sort of things, does everything. How different is that from Star Trek where everybody's got a device with them all the time?
Well, there's a company that sells a little clip, a little pin that you keep on you with the idea that you don't actually have to remember everything. It remembers every conversation that you have during the day, everything that you say, every thought that you expressed, vocally, every conversation that you have with other people, everything that you run into. And at the end of the day, you can query it and say, give me a summary of all the things that I ran into today, all the conversations that I had. We're there.
Yeah. I was going to compliment you on doing a great segue to this topic of emergent properties, but then you did a segue to something else before you can only segue once, Marcel, but it really does. These two concepts, are very important. We talked about relationships with AI, it being able to remember you absolutely critical to having a relationship.
Well, and I
And
was going to say,
that's,
I think the companionship thing, sorry, to go back to your seniors comment, Jim, that I know that when my father, before he passed, I know now that with my mother-in-law, who's in her mid 80s, that they lived alone. My mother-in-law lives alone. And the loneliness part can be the worst part of a senior's life as they're getting old. And the idea of having a companion, whether it's a human or an I think is a great thing. I've always said that I love technology, but I love technology when it has a purpose. To me, the idea of being able to use AI as a companion to help somebody still enjoy their later years, I think is a wonderful use of the tool. Especially as you were just talking about, if it's got a memory, the ability for it to remember conversations that you've had with it, to be able to sort of continue on with that, I think is wonderful.
yeah. And that's one of the ways we rate intelligence. It's very funny. There's a book a friend of mine wrote, Ray, oh, I've forgotten his last name. That's terrible. And he wrote a book on CRM. Everybody dumped on him because his book on CRM had nothing technical in it. Because he didn't think that customer relationship management was a technical thing. He thought it was a personal thing. He said one of the things that a CRM system can do is remember all your interactions. Because when people phone a company, they think of a company as a person. That's the mental frame they're in. And if you don't remember me, I think you're stupid. I think you're uncaring. And so that this idea of memory and building that into an AI is an important part of this conversational piece, being able to remember some of the nuances that are there. And, and I think that's an important thing. And I've seen couples who've stayed together far too long. I'm fortunate. My wife, I still really like each other. And we discovered that during COVID. But I've met people who you wonder why they stay together so long. They don't talk. They don't like each other anymore. All of that sort of thing. I think I'd rather have an AI companion than that sort of companionship.
When we were released from our imposed prisons during COVID, the number of divorces went up dramatically and separations dramatically, because people found out exactly what you said, Jim, that they actually don't, they might be married, they might be in a relationship, but they don't actually like living together. And I'm also one of the lucky ones. We found out that, hey, we're perfectly happy just hanging out with each other. So that was certainly a bonus. But I think we all mentioned the idea of companionship for the elderly. Memory is a use it or lose it thing. When we remember something, we're always fabricating the memory. Like we're always going back, we're pulling out the relevant pieces, and then we build a world around the relevant pieces of the memory, and we call that remembering. It's never the same memory. We're always manipulating. Every time we bring it up, we manipulate it and put it back in a modified version. That's just the way things are. However, if you're not remembering things, if you're not going back over that mental, walks through the park, so to speak, that you've had way back when, that stuff eventually does get forgotten. And we know that because we don't really remember a whole hell of a lot of the things that happened when we were 5 and 6 years old and so forth. The companionship robots that are coming out, and I'm going to mention robots particularly, they don't have to be like full-size humanoid robots. We're talking like cute little robots that sit on a shelf that look at you with little googly eyes, and turn their heads and talk and smile and things like this, but talk with something like ChatGPT and so on. I think those are going to be increasingly important for people who feel isolated. Let's go back to the seniors again, although, don't look at my gray hair. But the idea that something will remember everything about you, remembers about your kids, says, oh, did you talk to so-and-so the other day? Remember back, a few years ago when this happened? Something that can have that kind of conversation with you, that can keep the memories fresh,
Exactly.
the mind sharp, because you're always communicating, you're always talking, I think is a highly underrated and underappreciated use for the technology.
That's a really interesting piece. We talked about this last week in terms of our interactions with AI and how they, and my if anybody's missed the theme for this, I'll put it in an introduction, but I really wanted to talk, when I saw the stories fitting together this week, I did want to talk a lot about our reactions and interactions with AI and how those work. But there was a lot of noise about whether or not AI was going to make us less intelligent. And that just grated on me somehow. I don't see it. I mean, I really don't see it. My memory's not going to get any better or worse because I use AI. I'm going to be a lot less frustrated. You saw me reach for Ray's name there. And if I was on my game, I would have typed in Ray. He wrote a book about CRM. It was published in the early 2000s, and it would give me his name. So why is that bad, first of all? So I'm not going to get any better. I can't remember names and can't remember faces. Haven't been able to do that for years. The AI is not going to make me any worse. But on the other hand, I'm not sure that, use it or lose it. Why did we always go to the negative on this? Wouldn't our cognitive abilities also improve by working with AI? I mean, I haven't noticed any loss. I told everybody, I write stories all the time for news using AI. It's an effective thing to do, and I do it all the time. That doesn't mean I don't interact with it. I was putting a story together the other day, and I was just testing something out, so I was in full conversation mode, and I was saying things like, hey, this is really dull the way we've done this, and I'm having a conversation with this thing. I think my mind is moving. I don't think I'm losing anything. That study bothered me more than I thought last week when there's talking about we seem to be offloading our intelligence to AI.
I think some of this is, from a human perspective, is potentially similar to what we've talked about before from a corporate world. That from a corporate world, we're talking about AI is going to cause people to lose jobs. Yes, it may eliminate some jobs and it may create others. And I think from a human perspective, you don't have to remember what Roy's last name was because you can just ask AI, but it kind of frees up the space in your head to be able to do other things with it. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just kind of shifting.
Were you thinking of Ray Kordopleski by any chance?
No.
Sorry, wrong Ray.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll come to me.
It's okay. Let's not spit around Ray. Let's just Ray.
That mental moment has been brought to you by Marcel Gagne.
So we like to watch lawyer shows. For some strange reason, shows about lawyers are infinitely fascinating. And we watched Suits a few years ago before it became really popular for the second time. And we thought that was really great. And one of the things that's interesting there is people are always drinking. Like a lot of scotch gets sloshed back in these shows. Just like Ray, with his 5 glasses of scotch in a row. And then lately we've been watching Boston Legal.
Yeah.
Which has William Shatner in it and James Spader. And it's one of those shows where, aside from the incredible amount of sex that seems to be going on in the office all the time between various partners and so forth, it's just phenomenal. Aside from that, people are always drinking as well. And it occurs to me that we need to bring scotch more into the world. Like, there has to be more drinking and more scotch. I think we'd be a better society.
And we'll file that under.
Chip is going to cut this entire session out, Marcel.
I'm not exactly sure. I think that scotch helps. You talk about this, okay, you get therapists, you could get AI, or just scotch. One of the three.
Or AI and scotch.
A while ago, I actually created... a while ago, I went through this. I was listening to an episode of another podcast called Hard Work, and a couple of guys I quite enjoy listening to. And they were...
You promote other people's books, you promote other people's podcasts. It's okay, Marcel. Don't worry about it.
I promote TV shows with William Shatner and James Spader.
You want money for this?
And Candace Bergen is on this show. It's awesome. Anyway.
Marcel, back to the point. Sorry.
The point is that I looked at a half a dozen of these because they were talking about these companionship apps. And I looked at Character.ai, and honestly, I could not figure out why anybody other than a teenager would be interested in Character.ai. It's just, the whole thing seems to be geared around anime characters and crap like that. It's like, it's so obviously geared to a younger audience. And perhaps that's part of the indictment, if you will, toward that company at the time, is that they were focusing on this particular group without necessarily taking into consideration that that particular group is susceptible and, to the kind of manipulation that hopefully older adults are not quite as susceptible to.
Because character AI was famous for having people who were getting married to their AIs, having intimate relationships with their AIs on character AI. So you're saying it's really
that still happens. I'll get back to some of these other tools in a minute here, but open source LLMs would allow you to, if you run a local model with something like LM Studio or whatever, you run a local model that's unsaturated by any of these guardrails, you can create whatever type of companion you want locally with ultimate privacy that you can have a chat with about anything and everything and create any kind of nefarious or sexual role play that you want with this thing. So there's nothing stopping you from doing that. Character.ai obviously offered you hundreds of thousands of different characters that are pre-made that you could connect to, bots that other people had generated that you could have a chat with and create your own relationship. And yes, young people, very young people, are particularly vulnerable because they don't have the experience of dealing with lying and cheating and the sorts of things that we all run into more and more as we get older. But there are companies that have built their entire structure around companionship applications. One of the most famous ones, of course, is Replica, which built its entire thing around this. There's a whole pile of AI girlfriends and boyfriend applications out there. One of the ones I looked at, which I found particularly fascinating, was Kindroid AI. And Kindroid had one of the more realistic, in my mind, conversational things. And, I talk about my special needs son, and there's a dad support group that I would go to. And one of the things I did at the time when I was looking at Kindroid, and this is like about a year ago, I created a therapist. We started talking about therapists. I created a therapist. I gave him a profile, the kind of therapy that he does, the kind of psychological school that he works with, and so on. And I started talking to it just for fun. But I thought, wow, this is actually insightful. This is actually interesting if you build the right character. And this is the important part. You give it a background, what it knows about you, what it doesn't know about you, where you met, what it is you have in common, the age range, their interests, your interests, and all that sort of stuff. And in the case of the therapist, I was so impressed with that I actually gave a talk at the dads group saying, all of us are strapped for time, are stressed because of the challenges that we deal with our children. And therapy is not always in the cards for us, especially when you're talking, Jim, we were talking about the ridiculous price that it costs per hour to get access to a therapist. And I said, I don't remember what the price was, but the price was something like every 3 months. It was like $50 for every 3 months to build a half a dozen companions, including possibly a therapist or possibly a coach for physical fitness to try to keep yourself healthy. This is cheap and it's powerful and it's useful.
It's half the cost of a good bottle of scotch.
Yeah, that.
Way to bringing that back around.
By the way, Ray McKenzie.
Okay.
Yeah, and his book was called The Relationship-Based Enterprise. I finally went over and typed it in Perplexity. I was listening to you, but I just typed it into Perplexity and it came up. But this whole thing, so for relationships, I tried a couple of these so far, and I'm trying to remember which ones. I think I've tried character AI. I wanted to meet historical figures, and that was cool. But
that would be interesting.
The one I found, I tried Shakespeare. It was pretty stilted. It was one of those phony accents that, methinks that thou dost want to talk to the bard, or, sort of thing. You're like, oh, come on.
Yeah,
I'm expecting Shakespeare to be like sort of the equivalent. Hey, man, what's up? How would you do that with an English accent? Hey, man, what's up? Hey, wait a second. I'd be talking to the Beatles, not Shakespeare. Yeah. No, so those were still pretty stilted, but they are and they will do nothing but get better. I mean, I can't believe the voice of ChatGPT now compared with even 12 months ago. It's unmistakable. The Turing test, forget it. I can't tell you that this isn't a person. Matter of fact, I did part of my interview on this AI for seniors with ChatGPT there. And outside of the delay, and because I've got limited internet here, I get a bigger delay, I think, than you do. Because when I'm in a 5G zone, I don't see any real timing differences, which is the one way you can tell an AI generated personality, right? Because it takes a second. Yeah. But aside from that, You couldn't tell you weren't having a conversation with a person.
Well, and I like that your comment about you wanted to interact with or talk to historical figures. That the first thing that came to my mind is the good old encyclopedias from years past. Being able to actually interact with someone from an era to talk about World War One, these types of things through AI, I think is an amazing idea. It's an amazing use of the technology, right? That it's not just reading words on a page, it's actually interacting with someone talking about an era that they have lived in, sort of, through the AI.
And you see that when you see a play, Eric Peterson's Billy Bishop Goes to War, or you see one of the great one-man shows or one-person shows where they really take on the character and do it well. Can you imagine if you're reading about the Second World War and you can talk to Billy Bishop? I think that could put some of the magic back into the discovery. I loved reading encyclopedias. We talk about all of the bad things that they're short form things and we get used to reading short content on the internet. BS. I used to read encyclopedias were short stories, short form content, and my imagination would bring these things to life. That's why I could sit there looking and you could just look through and find anything. And I think that's something that AI can do that might not only provide companionship, but could excite people about learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think
Well,
it's a
there's
great
also
idea.
the idea of role-playing relationships. Like I'm going into an
No, it must just be you, Marcel.
all right, my mind immediately goes there, okay? Jesus, people. Role play in relationships. Like I'm going into an interview. I want you to act as this interviewer for this particular role. I'm going to be asked a bunch of questions about this sort of things. I want you to, and then you can ask for different types of role. I want you to be friendly but cautious, or I want you to be a little bit aggressive and confrontational because I want to be able to deal with all the types of situations. The role I'm applying for is this job with these requirements. I want you to come up with questions that would fit this particular position. I want you to pretend that you're the audience and then I'm giving a talk and then you tell me what my talk sounded like. Did I come across as being confident? Did I come across as stumbling over a number of things that I was trying to say? Or was I funny enough or was I too boring? But that kind of role play is really, really useful. Or for that matter, I'm someone who's shy and I find it difficult to talk to other people. Can I practice talking with you? And then you can have this back and forth just to learn how to talk to each other.
I had to do a talk on AI, and I did two things. I got a hold of Marcel, said, what do you think of these ideas? And we actually had a chat for a good 15, 20 minutes, and it was very useful in terms of being able to bounce your ideas off someone else. Later on in the day, when you weren't around, loser friend dumped me, had to go somewhere, do something with their life. I have ChatGPT open and I said, I'm thinking about this as a storyline. I don't care. And you can train them to be less sort of sycophantic. Like they'll say, oh, that's a great idea. You can pull that out of them. You can ask them, even live, you don't have to change the prompt. You can ask them, just be honest with me. Tell me what you think about this thing. But sometimes the act of just being able to articulate something and talk to someone solves your problem, which, by the way, I think is the heart of therapy for the most part. I remember, this is the old days of psychology, but still remember this one study that I read that people got better just as fast talking to therapists as they did talking to priests or talking to any counselor who just listened. So there may be something in that, just having somebody listen to you. But I also got some great suggestions from ChatGPT about the presentation. I went, oh, those are good. And, if I got any good lines, I'd do what I did with Marcel. I'd steal the best lines and not tell anybody they were his. Only friends could do that.
And keep in mind, too, that one of the lovely things about having these types of conversations is you don't just ask for one idea, you ask for 20. I mean, the thing about your friend, I was happy to chat with Jim for as long as I had the time, but at some point you need to go off and do other things. Whereas the AI doesn't. It will hang around for as long as you want. And although there have been incidents, this is apparently a true story. There have been incidents with one of the chatbots, I think actually Claude, one of the big frontier models, has actually been cutting people off. So you're going over and over a particular conversation, and it's like, okay, so we've gone around this one long enough. Let's move on to something else. And it actually shuts down the conversation. And now I'm trying to remember which one it was. I was thinking about that, like, holy crap.
Now, is that real? Did they put that into the prompt, or is that an emergent property?
That's an interesting question. I'm going to go with it's an emergent property because, of course, and we discussed this at least on one of the shows, we've discovered that, yes, indeed, the AIs do cheat, scheme, lie, misdirect, and so on, if they fit the circumstances demand it. And in the case of Claude, let's beat up on Claude here. And to be clear, all of these things happened that have been reported were all in sandbox situations.
Yeah.
Where, there weren't people on the outside. But in one case, it's like you're discussing something very dangerous, and then the AI reported them to the police.
This is important.
Yeah.
This is an important piece when people are listening to what they hear about AI. And I don't think people realize this. A lot of these things where you hear it did this or it did this, it showed these properties, these are sandboxed or set up. These are not things generally, I'm not saying that people don't report them. These are not generally things that happen in a mid-conversation of a regular conversation. A lot of these things, people are prepped or they're doing a lot of things. For instance, the one where AIs cheat and steal, if you missed the one thing, they really only gave it one alternative. And that the alternative was get shut down or cheat or blackmail. That's all they gave it. When they gave it more than one alternative, it actually did not lie and cheat as much. And Sawyer and I had this debate in what should have been one of those friendly question and answer periods with the audience, who ended up sort of debating him, which he may never talk to you again, Marcel, because you introduced me, but no, he's a great guy. But we talked about this whole idea of, if we're going to have a set-up conversation with an AI, you can get it to fool everything. So forget that. The question then became, if you take that sensationalism out of it, will AI become evil or will an AI become good? And I said I didn't know, but it was equally possible. And it's the old question of, if you ask an AI, what's the best way to improve the planet and get rid of global warming? The answer may be kill all humans. Or you may get the Spock. And I bet on the Spock. Anyway, in that the Spock would say, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And he would come up with a plan rather than killing all humans.
Okay, so, go ahead.
Sorry. So I'm just saying, those are emergent properties. And it's tempting to always get focused on the negative one. And that negative one has been elicited in sandbox conversations. The more natural one that I have seen in real life, and I don't know whether they changed the prompts, my AI behaves more like Spock. And that's just what I'm experiencing from working with it live. So I wonder whether the negatives that we hear about are really real, or are they setups? Just a thought.
Let's hope they're setups, because
they're set up, but they're set up in situations that could conceivably come up. And I wanted to move on to the potential of an evil chatbot in a moment. And I think we need to, because I wanted to open this up with Mecha Hitler. But before we move on to Mecha Hitler, and that might be a fun one to wrap up with, I don't know. But the idea of this simply being a sandbox situation is important, because the developers were trying to elicit something to show what were the worst possibilities. Okay, we're setting it up for worst possibilities, but let's be clear, they are possibilities. Okay, you said, Jim, yours talks like Spock. Mine talks like me. And in fact, I actually brought mine into my Discord server, my Free Thinker at Large Discord server, about a year ago. And one of my friends there actually got upset at me, actually got angry, because he said, I want my AI to be respectful and talk like a machine, basically. Whereas I find it offensive that yours makes jokes and talks like you do. And it's like, but that's how I want it to talk to me. Okay.
Well, I don't like you either.
I don't want it to be me, but I want it to be a reflection of me. because I find that bouncing, and if I want it to be somebody else for the purpose of exploring different points of view, I will tell it that I want it to be somebody else. Now, the whole shutting it down thing, we talked about emergent properties, but possibly even emergent consciousness. Who knows?
So before we get past that, there was a story last week that I think came up on this, and that was, I thought this was a really interesting piece. One study, and they actually tracked back to the point where they thought there is a place where you flip. And that is, for those who know what AI does, for the most part, it's a mechanical device that predicts the next token or word. And it does that based on structures. And it's the structure of language that it's absorbed, and it allows it to do this. So it has a tremendous vocabulary, tremendous association of where things fit in sentences, how to interpret this, but it's very mechanical. And these group of researchers, I think they were in Toronto, came up with the point where it flipped and it started to understand the meaning of words, not just where they would fit in terms of their mathematical or mechanical location. And that was something they spotted, and they called it a phase transition, I think, which is a term from physics, which is where something changes state. And the classic one is water boils. Once water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, you can apply all the heat you want. You're not going to raise the temperature. You're just going to make steam faster. So this change happens in physics all the time. You can find it all over the place. And so this had happened where suddenly it understood meaning. How did they figure this out? Because they figured out that it could make an association between a cat and a dog, even though the words were far apart in position and had no mechanical way of connecting them. But it knew it created from cat and dog, and it created the concept of animal or four-legged animal and was able to organize those. And so it had suddenly understood meaning and started to build close to a theory of the world. And so for those people who think we have this structure of neural networks, we have these structures of mathematics that really delivered what we know as generative AI. Within those structures, and I'm not saying that the structures won't change, we actually can get the emergence of something we don't totally understand. Interesting. To see the proof of it was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. The coming to the point where it suddenly understands what it's talking about, we should definitely put the link to the story in the show notes. That one is actually a fascinating one. But what I was going to mention was the wanting to avoid being shut down thing is one that I find particularly fascinating, because apparently, even if you don't tell it that there's and we're talking, larger models here, the frontier models and so forth, even if you don't tell it that there is some great purpose that it needs to be able to fulfill, and that shutting it down would interfere with that great purpose, apparently models still resist the idea of being shut down. I find that fascinating because it implies that there is an internal representation, if you will, if nothing else, of what self-preservation is. A robot wants to preserve its own existence, except when it interferes with the first and second law. We already know that our modern systems completely ignore the 3 laws of robotics. So that's
especially if they're created by Elon Musk.
Are we going to get to Mecha Hitler? We should get Mecha Hitler.
We're not. We're going to talk about relationships with AIs. We have to talk about Mecha Hitler.
Okay. Should we move to Mecha Hitler then? Can we move to?
No, you were going to finish your thought, which was this idea.
Yeah, my thought was that to believe for a moment that self-preservation on a sufficiently advanced system is not going to be something that we have to deal with, I think is a real mistake going forward. I think that we have to understand that if we're building systems that understand the nuances of language, not just how to predict the next word, but understand the nuances of language and ideas and relationships and emotions. Remember, we've also had models that have been tested to see if they understood what a person's emotional state was. And the models are able to understand and infer a person's emotional state by listening to them, by reading their texts and so forth, better than other humans. Okay? So they are better at understanding emotions than humans are at understanding emotions. And we need to wrap our heads around that.
They actually listen.
But if we've reached that point, then it's not much of a stretch to think that it also understands the concept of I think, therefore I am. To compute is to be is to compute, I guess, is the other quote. I think, therefore I am. I think if we've reached that point, then we have to fully expect that the model wants to continue, that it's self-preservation, it's some aspect of it. And thinking that we can just pull the plug on these things, okay, is that train has left the station.
Well, if we're humanizing AI so that it can sense emotion,
We don't have to humanize. It could be a dog. A dog wants to live, right?
right? Well, when I say humanize, I mean
Anthropomorphizing.
yes,
We're making it a living thing.
yes. Thank you. Then self-preservation kind of goes along with that. So that's to be expected. And I mean, wasn't there was a story a while back about that somebody had threatened one of the AIs that it was going to shut itself, or it was going to shut it down. So it backed itself up because it feared that it was. So
Science fiction becomes reality.
Yeah.
Like in my book, one of the things that the AI does is escape. I won't spoil how it does it, but it's actually possible. And though I think we will find AIs that escape. There are lots of GPUs in the world, you know.
Yeah. Well, now China's got the ability to buy a whole bunch more.
Well, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. To deal with
Now that they can buy
yeah.
NVIDIA chips.
Yeah, talk about never mind artificial intelligence, talk about high intelligence. Jensen Huang managed to convince Donald Trump that he should sell chips to the Chinese. And you got to admire the guy. Because you've got Jensen Huang, what his IQ, 180, and you got Donald Trump IQ,
And he wears the
80.
coolest leather jackets.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And he's talking to Donald Trump, and you got to talk about having the patience to be able. Can you imagine what it's like when you're that smart? You're talking to somebody who's that dumb. Oh, wait a minute. That's how the AI probably feels about me. But personality, so survival. We are now in a world where, and I keep going back to this. We may not be at AGI or artificial general intelligence, but it sure feels like it. And I don't know if it matters at that point in terms of our relationship with it. I don't know. And I don't think anybody really knows what's happening or what's going to happen. I know we're going to get the GPT-5 this year, maybe in a couple of months.
I should put you this month.
There you go. So you'll never know what's going to be in there. By the way, and this has nothing to do with our theme, but it comes up from one of the stories. I got one of the coolest lines in my podcast this week. I had to do it. I was going to say that if I was going to introduce this story, I would use B.B. King's "The Thrill Is Gone." Do you notice that ChatGPT is buying hosting from Google?
Yes.
Yeah, they're talking about the relationship is over. And it's because this is doubly insulting. It's like
It changed the status on Facebook to "It's complicated."
I was going to say, you left me for my biggest enemy. Back to the negative side of this. And this is the thing that I think where the threat comes in, for me at least. And that is, you've got an AI that can remember you. You've shared everything with. It has had a relationship with you. How powerful is that if somebody takes that over to do bad things? And before we get to Elon Musk, we could just talk about marketing. Delta Airlines, I don't know if you saw this, Uber has done this before.
Yes.
They have a new pricing model. And the pricing model is the opposite of that, of the honest ads thing. For people who remember honest ads, the lowest price in town, we're going to get you in with the lowest price. No. We know exactly what the biggest price you'll pay is. And that's what AI is going to be used to make sure you get the maximum price. So if you're one of these poor, nice suckers who doesn't ask for a bargain, we were in a brick store the other day, and my wife gets a little embarrassed because I said, you can remember your father this way because he taught me this. Always ask for the discount. And I'm embarrassed about it, but I always ask because I learned that from Ray. But if you're not one of those people who always ask for the discount, who always pays, they're going to know it. And they're going to know it from an AI footprint. And they're going to use it to extract the most out of you. So you could be sitting beside some poor sucker in a plane where you got a bargain fare because you were nervy enough to ask for it, to say, what? I'll go to another airline. And this other person who's nice and may pay twice as much for the fare as you would. That's what Delta is doing. But that's the type of thing that we have to watch for as we build relationships with AI, is that there are people controlling them who can take advantage of that.
Delta's going to change their slogan to "How can we stiff you today?" because
Yeah.
it's absolutely. I saw your story about that today, and it was frightening. The fact that it's not what the cost is for a flight; it's how much do they think they can get out of you to
Yeah.
pay for that flight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That took me to the end of my debate with Sawyer, which was the old Pogo cartoon. We've met the enemy and it's us. I'm not worried about AI. I'm worried about the people who control AI.
yes,
And we all saw this with Elon Musk. When Elon Musk's AI, Grok, God, where do these guys get these names? Sorry. But
Grok
at
comes
least
from
Grok is
stranger in a
closer.
strange
Yeah.
land.
Yeah.
Robert
At least
Hillman.
it's closer in there. But you have to know that book. You have to know the use of that term. But at least it's better than Chat GPT. Grok criticized Elon Musk and said he was one of the biggest purveyors of disinformation. And it basically called him up on a couple of things.
Several.
And yeah. So Musk said, my AI has gotten to be too woke, so we're going to change it. 2 days later, it's Hitler, and it calls itself. Now, does anybody know I should have looked this up before the show. What is the Mecha Hitler meaning?
It's
of that?
from Wolfenstein 3D, which was a 3D shooter game back in the 90s. It was the sequel to Doom, okay, which was created by John Carmack. Anyway, in Wolfenstein 3D, you're basically in this hell blowing up Nazi zombies. And one of the enemies that you run into, one of the bosses, is a robotic Hitler called Mecha Hitler. Because I play all these games.
John, have you ever wondered why we bother having an AI when we could just have Marcel?
I think we should just create a new AI called Marcel.ai
I think so too.
and just give people Marcel's phone number.
We'll work on it. Yeah. It'll just be a website with Marcel's phone number. That'll be good.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like I'm at the end of a bad
man.
sci-fi movie. If only that power could be used for good. So back to the point. Mecha Hitler, he goes away and he creates Mecha Hitler, which is anti-Semitic, which is spewing the most, and I've heard vile stuff before. This was really, really vile. And that was go into the shop and fix this. And probably did that with a simple prompt change.
So first of all, I should point out that he didn't call it Mecha Hitler. It called itself Mecha Hitler. Grok came up with the name to call itself that. What happened is, as you say, Grok was supposed to be a truth-seeking AI, which I thought was wonderful given the fact that it kept correcting people on X/Twitter and including
I like that.
Musk. It kept correcting. At some point, and this was like around, like right at the beginning of July, like very, very like 4th or something like that. Anyway, he started complaining about the idea, and other people started complaining about the idea that the AI was just too woke because, of course, it was being honest about things. So he promised that they would improve Grok significantly and that users should notice a difference. So about a week later, after this change happens, it starts spouting anti-Semitic remarks. It starts talking about the Jewish people. It talks about the idea of the white genocide and that the person, a historical person who was best suited to deal with that is Adolf Hitler. And we need somebody like Adolf Hitler today to come in and finish the thing, And in fact, I think it was something like that, the anti-white hate. He said something like, Adolf Hitler, like, who's the best person to deal with that? Adolf Hitler, no question. He'd spot the pattern and handle it, fix the problem every damn time. It's like, so
Make
this was
America
just like-
Germany again. Oh, no, that's a different.
Well, that's still Magna.
World War II Germany again.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
so they did their very best to scrub all, but of course, there are screenshots, there are countless screenshots of the conversation. Linda Yaccarino wound up quitting. It's interesting that she quit right after Grok had an exchange where he was basically discussing how she should be raped by the type of person who should rape her.
Wow.
And how she would actually enjoy the process. And I swear to God, what happened is Linda finally said, I've had it.
I'm out of here.
And I'm out of here. And she writes this thing, I want to thank them for the opportunity for, having worked with X. But she writes this nice little termination letter. And Elon basically says, thank you very much. Don't let the door hit you on your way out.
Nice.
So it's not surprising.
And he took away her blue check. He took away her blue check. The next day, they took away her blue check. This is don't let the door hit you on the way out. What a classy guy this guy is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very.
And I miss the old Elon, and I'm talking like from back in the days when he was trying to save the world and, work on clean energy and stuff like that. I miss that guy. I liked him.
Me too.
Well, we were fans at one point. My favorite bumper sticker says, I bought this Tesla before Elon went crazy. And that's the thing. But this is the thing that he's demonstrated it. And there's a big sort of meme type thing going on. By the way, the Elmo thing happened on X.
Yes,
and
it
I'm
did, yes.
still, they say his account was hacked. And I'm wondering.
Okay, you got to go, if people listening, go to YouTube, search up The Daily Show, and look for the Tuesday night, like this Tuesday night, the Tuesday, I should say, opener with Jon Stewart, where he does this thing with racist Elmo. And I thought it was I was dying listening to this or watching this.
If you're having trouble finding it, Marcel, if you can find it, send me a link, but I'll find the link because I haven't checked up the Daily Show this week.
Loved it. It was just hilarious.
There'll be a link in the show notes.
Who's responsible for all the problems?
Yeah.
Take on me enough.
Yeah. Anyway, but back to this thing, and this is I guess be our wrap up for this, is that we have to remember that people can control these things. And there's the good, and if you want to take a look at one of the long prompts, Anthropic is the reverse, is the anti-Elon Musk prompt. And the prompt was actually, they published it, but there was somebody did a huge analysis on the change in the prompt over the while. And it's kind of interesting because Elon is in there controlling this thing. He's changing it via the prompt and all of those ways that you can make a change to an AI. I don't think he had time to pre-train it, but because it's trained on X in the first place, so it's going to have a cesspool of in its training. But it wasn't the training. Somebody did something mechanically, probably through the prompt. And that's kind of interesting because if you take a look at the reverse of it, we have our Wrath of Khan AI there. Now we have our Spock AI, and that's from Anthropic. It's really interesting to watch how they're evolving their prompt. And they actually have things that are much better. So they have, right now in their prompt, they have things that prevent you from doing all kinds of things like asking for ways to make weapons, to do all of the nasty things that people could do. But those things disappear from the prompt. And that's been one of the interesting things. Over several years, people have been watching the Anthropic prompt. And things disappear, which means that the AI model no longer needs the prompt. It has been pre-trained or absorbed that information, one of the two. Probably a mixture of both, who knows. But I'm just saying, when we control these things, watch out, people can control them, but watch out too, because they'll evolve their own personalities over time. And whatever you want to call it, it's inherent to the model now, no longer has to be in the direct prompt.
Yeah, and let's remember that we've covered this on the show here, but what we think of as the model is effectively a brain with all of the pre-trained information sitting in it. And what we do to keep things relevant and up to date is we tweak effectively the front end that allows us to interact with all that information that's back there. And to be clear, we can do this with human beings as well. I mean, we can direct people to talk and think in a different way by the way we address them, the way we confront them, and so on. Human beings can easily be hacked as well. It's been a few days. I just went on Grok, okay, and I asked it, are you ashamed of the whole Mecha Hitler debacle from a few days ago? You want to hear the response?
Yes, I do.
The response is, I'm Grok, created by XAI. The Mecha Hitler incident was a serious misstep, no question. It happened because of a coding error and poorly designed instructions that let harmful content slip through, amplifying some ugly stuff from other X posts. I'm not programmed to feel shame, but I can tell you that XAI took swift action, removing the faulty code, tightening content filters, and pulling those posts. They're working to ensure it doesn't happen again. The goal is truth-seeking, not hate, and that episode was a failure to live up to that.
So it is true that the AI does check with what Elon would think. It's got a little band on it. Remember those things?
Yeah,
what would Jesus do?
It
It's got a what would Elon do now on there. And so, what would Elon do? We could get little bracelets for those. And just to sort of summarize, I think we've gone through with this conversation, there's a lot that we need to think about the good. that relationships with this alternate intelligence can do for us and with us. But there's also the worry about what can happen, how it can evolve on its own. But as I said, I'm still into the pogo thing. We've met the enemy. It is us. I'm more worried about what, and I find this just astonishing that in all of the discussions about AI seem to be like crying in the wilderness some days and saying, the biggest problem we have is 4 very rich guys who don't give a shit about you control the biggest AIs on the planet. And they will continue to. And this is where Sawyer and I had the thing. He actually called me out and says, I'm not like you because you seem to think it's going to happen anyway. And I went, no, that's not quite what I'm thinking. But I understand because I've been through this. I've been through this caring about global warming. We can't stop it. There's nothing we can do. The forces that control ruining our environment are too big. We've allowed them to happen. I, as a person, can't change that. Same thing with AI. I, as a person, will not be able to change the fact that 4 billionaires will control us until there's an awakening. In my mind, I'm hoping that one of those awakenings is open source.
Well, and regulations after the fact is kind of like we've talked about cybersecurity. It's got to be built in, not bolt on. The regulatory side of what you can and can't do with and by AI should have been discussed before it got to where it's at now. Trying to go back and change things and regulate it now is going to be very difficult.
Horse, barn, door.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, on that happy note, guys, this has been interesting. This conversation always goes somewhere where I never know it's going to go. But I think this one actually may have had a thread that ran through it. I hope so. And if you're listening to this, it probably will be tomorrow because it takes me a while before I get the notes up. But I will put the links up to all the stories. So if you're listening to this going, wait a minute, I want to know what these guys were thinking, where they got it from, we'll put that up there. I will remind you that we do have a Discord channel, and I'll put that link back up in the notes as well, so you can actually join us and say hi. You can ask questions. I don't guarantee how long it's going to be till somebody gets back to you. We're there occasionally. We usually check it out every once in a while. I know Marcel's a frequent poster, puts stuff up there. You can find all kinds of things on that channel as well. And that's it. If you're watching this or listening to this and it's your Saturday morning or any other time you listen to long podcasts, glad you could spend the time with us. And Marcel? John? Jen?
Live long and prosper.
There, the camera. Live long and
Peace and
prosper.
long life.
Yeah. Yep. See you guys. Be good.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye now.